Hey there. Tonight, we're stepping into a world that smelled a little stronger than most. A job that required no sword and no scroll. Just a deep tub, a lot of patience, and the willingness to stomp around in someone else's urine. In this episode, we're talking about the ancient profession long before laundromats and modern detergents existed. So, before you get too comfortable, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel, but only if this kind of content genuinely helps you wind down at night. Also, let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you? It's oddly comforting to know that we're not the only ones wide awake, quietly drifting through history together at this hour. Now, dim the lights. Maybe pull your blanket a little closer and take in that soothing scent of your fabric softener. Let the faint ticking of the clock carry you back through time, because you're about to take your place in a stone-built workshop that smells sharp, acrid, and unmistakably human. You've just woken up in ancient Rome. The first thing that hits you isn't the light, it's the smell. A pungent cocktail of stale urine, damp wool, and something sour that might be yesterday's pottage, or just the ever-present mildew. Your nose wrinkles instinctively, but there's no escaping it. This is the scent of your livelihood. Your bed is a simple straw mattress laid directly on the stone floor of the Folonica. No pillow, no blanket, just straw, some of which has begun to mold from the constant humidity. You sit up, stretching your aching limbs, and your joints protest with audible pops. At 25, your body feels twice its age, worn down by years of laborious work. The workshop is already stirring. Fellow fullers shuffle about, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Someone coughs, a deep, wet sound that suggests the beginnings of a chest infection. In the corner, a rat scurries away with a piece of discarded bread. The day has begun. You dress quickly, pulling on a tunic that was once white, but now bears the permanent stains of your trade. The fabric is stiff from repeated exposure to ammonia and lye, and it chafes against your skin. You tie a cloth around your waist, more out of habit than modesty. Everyone here has seen everything. Your first task is to check the urine vats. These large stone basins are the heart of the Folonica, filled with a mixture of water and human urine collected from public latrines. The ammonia in the urine is essential for cleaning and whitening the woolen garments brought in by clients. You approach the vats, the acrid smell making your eyes water. Using a wooden paddle, you stir the contents, ensuring the mixture is ready for the day's work. Next, you prepare the cloth. Bundles of soiled tunics, togas, and cloaks await processing. You sort them by color and fabric type, careful to separate the delicate from the sturdy. Some garments are stained with wine, others with blood or sweat. Each tells a story, but you don't have time to ponder them. Work is waiting. With the vats ready and the cloth sorted, you begin the fulling process. Stepping into the vat, the cold liquid soaks through your sandals and into your skin. You start treading, lifting and pressing the cloth underfoot in a rhythmic motion. This action cleans the fabric and tightens the weave, making it more durable. The work is monotonous and physically demanding, but you've grown accustomed to it. As you work, your mind drifts. you think about the clients who will wear these garments. Merchants, senators, perhaps even a member of the imperial family. They rely on your labor to maintain their appearances, yet they would never deign to set foot in a Fullonica. Your work is essential, but your status is low. It's a paradox you stopped questioning long ago. After hours of treading, your legs ache, and your feet are pruned and raw. You step out of the vat, wiping the sweat from your brow with a cloth that's no cleaner than your tunic. The next phase involves rinsing the garments in clean water, then treating them with fuller's earth, a type of clay that helps remove grease and improve texture. You apply the clay by hand, kneading it into the fabric, then rinse it out, repeating the process as needed. Once the garments are clean, you hang them to dry in the courtyard. Lines crisscross the open space, heavy with dripping cloth. The sun is your ally here, bleaching the fabric and killing some of the lingering odors. You keep a watchful eye for birds and thieves. Both are known to ruin a day's work. As the day winds down, you gather the dried garments and begin the finishing touches. Using wooden paddles, you beat the cloth to soften it, then stretch it on frames to restore its shape. Some clients request pleats or specific folds, which you create using heated irons and careful manipulation. It's meticulous work, but it brings a sense of pride. Finally, you fold the garments and place them in baskets for delivery. Your hands are cracked and stained, your back aches, and your stomach growls with hunger. But the work is done. For today. Tomorrow, it begins anew. As you prepare to leave, you take one last look around the Fullonica. The vats, the cloth, the tools, all are part of your world. It's a hard life, but it's yours. And in ancient Rome, that's more than many can say. Fullonicae, or Roman laundries, were not only widespread in ancient Roman cities, but also officially regulated by local laws and deeply integrated into the urban economy. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii and Ostia reveals multi-room workshops with stone treading vats, urine collection jars, rinsing basins, and drying courtyards. Workers, known as fullones, routinely stood barefoot in vats of stale urine to tread garments clean. This wasn't just tolerated, it was standard practice due to the ammonia in urine acting as a natural degreaser. Ancient sources like Pliny, the Elder, and Martial mention fullers in their essential if odorous craft. In fact, a Fullonica's success was so important that guilds, collegia, of fullers formed, sometimes even erecting altars and dedicating statues to their patron gods like Minerva or the Lares, household spirits. Yet despite the vital nature of their work, fullers remained low status, often enslaved or impoverished. And yes, some even lived and slept in the workshops, as excavated evidence from Pompeii suggests, where bedding materials were found directly inside laundry areas. You didn't dream of this life. No little boy ever lay beneath the stars in a Roman alleyway whispering, "Someday I want to tread wool in a vat of urine." And yet here you are, blinking crust from your eyes in the dim haze of a sooty dawn, your ankles sore from yesterday's stomping, and your future tied up in a tub full of fermenting pee. You're a fuller. And no, you weren't born one. Nobody is. This job doesn't pass gently from father to son like the sweet scent of baked bread or the chisel of a sculptor's trade. It arrives in your life like a blunt rock dropped into your pocket, heavy, unpleasant, and impossible to ignore. So, how did you get here? Let's start at the beginning. Your beginning. Maybe you were born into a bustling Roman apartment block, the kind with thin wooden floors and loud neighbors who all somehow shared one public latrine. Maybe your mother was a laundress, your father a dockhand, and you the third of 6 children with names your parents reused out of convenience. In that kind of world, childhood ends fast. You learn to hustle before you lose your first tooth. But sometimes, hustle isn't enough. Maybe there was a fire or a plague. Maybe the landlord raised the rent again, or a crooked magistrate seized your father's stall at the market. It doesn't take much. In Rome, the distance between poor and destitute is about 3 missed meals wide. Or maybe your parents didn't make it at all. And you? You ended up an orphan in the care of a kindly neighbor for exactly 3 weeks, until she realized she couldn't feed you and pawned you off to a guild in exchange for a sack of grain and a promise you'd be taught a trade. Spoiler: she didn't ask which one. And so, you arrived at the Phalanca, not as an employee, as property. Your first day was unforgettable, not because anyone welcomed you, but again, because of the smell. It hit you like a wall, not the soft, manure-ish stink of the street. No, this was stronger, like old chamber pots and sour wine and something sharp that bit the inside of your nose and didn't let go. You gagged. The master laughed. They didn't start you in the vat. That would have been merciful. No. First came scraping floors, fetching water, hauling buckets. Your hands were too small to carry the heavy amphorae of collected urine, so you learned to drag them, leaving trails behind you that nobody thanked you for. By nightfall, your knees were bruised, your back ached, and your belly was still half empty. The other workers didn't speak much. Their eyes were tired, in a way that said words weren't worth the effort. One man, missing 3 teeth and most of his name, told you quietly that once you learned the ropes, it didn't get easier, just more routine. You believed him. Of course, not everyone came here the same way. Some fullers were born unlucky enough to be caught in debt traps. Miss one, too many payments on a cart or roof repairs, and suddenly you're indentured. Not forever. Just long enough to forget what free time felt like. The contract said 5 years. The master chuckled and said, nobody leaves after 5 years with their dignity or their lungs. Others were inherited. Imagine this. Your father's a fuller. You grow up in the shadow of the vats, breathing sour air, watching his skin crack and his hands blacken. You vow to never end up like him. But when he dies, collapsed by the vat one day, while rinsing a senator's toga, you inherit his tools, his apron, his job. It's not a gift. It's a life sentence with no courtroom. Then there are the truly unfortunate, the enslaved. Captured in war or born into bondage, they never had a say. They're chained to this trade like the stones around their ankles, and no one asks how they feel about it because their feelings don't matter. They are the muscle behind the labor, and even when they master the craft, they earn no title, no wage, no freedom. But let's be honest, even if you're not enslaved, you're still stuck. You think about quitting sometimes, fantasize about vanishing into the hills, becoming a shepherd, a tanner, even a gravedigger, anything. But where would you go? Who would take you? You're not a smith with skills, not a scribe with letters. You're the guy who washes tunics in piss. Your reputation clings tighter than the smell. Still, some call it honest work. It's not theft. It's not war. You feed yourself, more or less. Maybe there's a bit of pride when a fine robe leaves your hands bright and clean. Maybe. But pride doesn't erase how you got here. You think about it sometimes. Usually in the quiet before sunrise, when the city is still half asleep and the streets haven't yet filled with shouting vendors and limping drunks. You sit on a stone outside the workshop, knees up, chin down, watching the light creep across the rooftops. You remember being a boy, running barefoot in alleyways, dreaming of anything else. Anything but this. You didn't choose this life, but now it wears you like a second skin, and it never comes off. In ancient Rome, the Phalanca was often staffed by society's most vulnerable individuals. Many of the people who worked there, particularly in the larger operations found in cities like Pompeii and Ostia, were enslaved. These enslaved fullers had no legal freedom, were not paid for their labor, and lived in harsh conditions, often in close proximity to the filthy vats they worked in. Enslaved individuals in these workshops were the backbone of the industry, subjected to grueling tasks that included stomping on wool in vats of fermented urine, cleaning garments, and handling the refuse of society's wealthy elite. But the story of fullers wasn't limited to slavery. Many poor children, orphans, and impoverished citizens found themselves apprenticed to fullers out of necessity rather than choice. Orphaned children might be placed in the care of a guild in exchange for a small payment, and while they were taught a trade, this usually meant being bound to the Phalanca, often for life. These apprentices learned the trade not as a means to upward mobility, but as a means to survival, performing arduous labor in exchange for basic sustenance. They were, in effect, not much better off than enslaved workers. For some, entering the profession was tied to personal debt. The practice of nexum, or debt bondage, could trap a man into the trade for years, or even for life. A debtor might sign a contract with a fuller, agreeing to work for little or no wages until the debt was paid off. However, in many cases, this system proved exploitative, and workers found themselves stuck in the same position, unable to break free from their obligations. Additionally, among the freedmen of Rome, a father's trade might be inherited by his children. While this was an accepted part of Roman society, it often meant that children born into the Phalanca found themselves bound to the same life of poverty and labor as their parents, with few opportunities to escape. Though the work of a fuller was sometimes considered honest labor, the conditions under which they worked were anything but glamorous. Fullers faced long hours, dangerous chemicals, and dangerous working conditions. Their reputations were often tied to the very smell of the work they did. Urine, sweat, and the grime of the city clung to their skin and their clothes. For many, it was a life they had little choice in. Becoming a fuller was not a decision made out of passion or ambition. It was simply the harsh reality of a world where the distance between poverty and desperation was razor thin. Whether enslaved, orphaned, or debt-bound, the workers in Phalanca were often trapped in a cycle of labor and suffering, with little hope of escape or advancement. You step into the Phalanca again, and the smell hits you before the door even opens. Not a gentle wave, not a subtle whiff. Number it hits you like a drunk centurion throwing up at your feet. You gag, eyes already watering, and your stomach threatens open revolt. But what's new? Welcome to the soul of the operation, the beating, boiling, belching heart of every Roman fuller's workshop, the urine vat. Yes, You heard that right. Urine from humans. Warm, fresh if you're lucky, fermented if you're not. You shuffle inside and try not to breathe through your nose. A difficult task, since that's the only nose you've got. The shop is stone-floored and partially open to the sun, because even the Romans understood that you couldn't trap this many odors in a sealed space without invoking divine wrath. Long, shallow tubs run along the walls like forgotten bathtubs, each one holding a thick, yellowish broth of cloth and liquid. Some of the tubs bubble faintly, others steam. None inspire confidence. You peek into one, as if curious. You shouldn't have done that. Floating in the liquid is what was once a tunic, now ghost white from the ammonia-rich bath. You swear something moved. It might have been a scrap of cloth, or a bug, or a small, extremely unhappy spirit. A man is already inside one of the tubs, knee-deep, trousers rolled up, stomping like he's trying to crush grapes with vengeance. His feet slap rhythmically against the wool. Squish, slap, squish, slap. The sound is unholy. "Morning," he shouts cheerfully, as if he's not currently standing in a pea stew. "That's warm today, good for the cloth." You nod, unable to form words. Your body has activated emergency survival mode. Your brain is demanding an explanation. Your nose is filing for emancipation. So, why urine? Well, Romans weren't just building aqueducts and inventing concrete. They were also pioneers in the fine art of filth chemistry. They figured out that when you let human urine sit for a while, it starts to break down and form ammonia, which is a natural cleaning agent. A very pungent one. Soaking wool in this homemade horror softened the fabric, broke down oils from the sheep's fleece, and helped release dirt and grease embedded in the cloth. And since Roman citizens didn't exactly have washing machines, or a modern sense of dignity, this was the best option available. But how do you fill these vats? Simple. You ask the people. In fact, the Romans installed public urinals, big stone pots on the street corners, and invited the population to contribute. Relieve yourself for Rome, you might say. Some shops even hired boys to go door to door, collecting full chamber pots in the early morning hours. Picture that. You're 12 years old, knocking on doors to ask if anyone has any fresh donations for the wool. And if you're a savvy fuller, you don't just rely on local streams of generosity. You pay for the privilege. The man in the vat lifts one foot and examines a deep blister on his toe. He pops it absently and goes right back to stomping. You swallow hard. "Wanna go?" he asks, gesturing. You laugh nervously, unsure whether to say yes or faint. But you step forward, because this is your job now. You remove your shoes. Not that it helps. You've already lost the battle with cleanliness today. Your first step into the vat is unforgettable. The liquid is warm, which is somehow worse. Your skin tingles, not in a good way. The wool squelches beneath your feet, and a faint film immediately begins to coat your ankles. You begin to stomp. Hesitantly at first, then with more vigor. You fall into rhythm. Squish, slap, squish, slap. You're dancing with the devil's bathwater. An hour passes, or maybe 5. Time moves differently when you're standing in a human excretion jacuzzi. Your feet are beginning to wrinkle. You glance down and realize your toenails are stained. The wool squirming underfoot feels slimier now. Your calves ache. You're sweating. but the stench is so overwhelming you can't tell if it's from exertion or olfactory trauma. You glance at your colleague. He shrugs. Good for the skin, they say. Clears the pores. You nod politely, though you doubt you'll ever feel clean again. Eventually, someone calls for the cloth to be removed and scrubbed. You climb out of the vat and step onto a nearby mat, trying not to track ammonia sauce all over the shop. A bucket of water waits, though it's about as fresh as yesterday's soup. You rinse your feet, which helps only marginally. The soaked cloth is dragged from the vat, dripping gold-tinted liquid like some cursed tapestry. It steams faintly in the cool morning air. You catch a whiff and nearly stumble. It's worse outside the tub than in it. The urine, once heated and agitated, is now releasing its full bouquet into the air. This is the centerpiece of the Polonica, not the drying racks, not the stretching frames, not the paddles or combs or looms. The urine vat is where the real transformation happens, where dirty wool becomes acceptable cloth, where stench meets science, where you, poor fool, earn your daily bread by fermenting in a bath of Roman public sacrifice. You wonder, idly, what your friends are doing, the ones who apprenticed with bakers or blacksmiths. You wonder if their shops smell like bread or charcoal, or if their toes are clean. You envy them, but you're a fuller now, and the vat is your domain. Just don't fall in. You've seen it happen. No one ever forgets. One of the more interesting aspects of fulling was the use of fuller's earth, a naturally occurring clay-like substance found in various parts of the Roman Empire. Fuller's earth was a crucial part of the cleaning and finishing process of wool. It was an absorbent, mineral-rich substance that helped to draw out the impurities from the wool fibers during the fulling process. In the days before modern detergents, fuller's earth served as a chemical agent that both thickened the wool and enhanced its color. When combined with water and urine, it acted as a purifying agent, soaking up oils and dirt trapped in the fibers. The mineral particles would cling to any residual grease, allowing the fullers to rinse away impurities more easily. This method was highly effective and allowed Roman fullers to achieve a level of cleanliness and texture in wool that would have been difficult to replicate with primitive cleaning methods alone. Some fullers even used chalk and ashes alongside fuller's earth to bleach the wool, giving it a more uniform, pale appearance. This was especially useful for wool that was intended to be dyed, as a cleaner and smoother fiber would take color more evenly. Roman fullers often experimented with different combinations of substances and varying techniques to optimize the fabric's finish. The presence of fuller's earth and other cleaning agents demonstrates just how much ancient Roman fullers understood about chemistry and materials, albeit through trial and error, long before modern science would catch up. Your task for the day, treading the cloth. It's a laborious process that involves stomping on soaked fabrics in vats filled with a concoction of water and alkaline substances. The smell is overpowering, a pungent mix of ammonia and wet wool that clings to your nostrils. But you persevere, knowing that this process is essential to clean the garments of Rome's citizens. From the tunics of commoners to the togas of senators, all pass through your hands, or rather, your feet. As you continue to tread, you can't help but think about the irony of your situation. You're performing a vital service, yet society looks down upon you because of the nature of your work. The Follonica is often located on the outskirts of the city, away from the more respectable establishments. Despite the social stigma, the demand for your services is high. Clean clothing is a status symbol in Rome, and you're the one making it possible. Still, the job takes its toll. Your feet are constantly submerged in the harsh solution, leading to cracked skin and infections. The physical strain is immense, and the long hours leave you exhausted. Yet, there's a certain pride in your work. You take satisfaction in seeing a soiled garment transformed into a clean, bright piece of clothing. It's a tangible result of your labor, a testament to your skill and perseverance. As the day wears on, you continue the monotonous task, your movements becoming automatic. The sun beats down, adding to your discomfort. But you know that each stomp brings you closer to the end of the day, to the moment when you can finally rest your weary body. In the end, being a fullo is a thankless job, but it's one that keeps the wheels of Roman society turning. Without you, the city would be awash in filth, its citizens clad in dirty garments. So, you continue to tread, one foot in front of the other, embracing the laborious rhythm of your trade. It's before dawn, but the workshop is alive with activity. The day always starts early for a fuller. Your feet are cold, the stone floors are slippery, and the low hum of the Follonica, the fuller's workshop, fills the air. You step gingerly over piles of soiled garments, some caked with mud, others stained with things you'd rather not identify. There's no escape from it. The scent of your surroundings already clings to you. You've entered a world where cleanliness is just a dream, and your job, as a fuller, is to bring that dream to life. By now, your hands are already cracking from the harsh exposure to water and chemical agents. The smell clings to your fingers, gets under your nails. You can't scrub it off. Not that you can afford soap anyway. Real soap is for the rich, and you're a peasant. Maybe a little clay will help. A bit of fuller's earth mixed with water to scrub down the wool, to soak it in and work the dirt out. The clay sticks like mud on a rainy day. Your nails? They're black by now, permanently stained by the grime that no amount of scrubbing seems to touch. Every time you touch the fabric, it leaves a mark, and you can't help but wonder if these marks are a reflection of the years you're slowly losing. Next, it's time to rinse. This part doesn't get any better, but it's a necessary step. You move the wool from one basin to the next, letting it soak in fresh water that's trickling in from the aqueducts, trying to wash away the last traces of the urine-laced concoction. As you agitate the cloth in the basins, you notice the way the water changes from clear to a sickly yellow. It's disturbing, but you've grown numb to it. The only thing you can do now is focus on the task at hand. There's a rhythm to the work. You've learned to ignore the discomfort in your feet, the way the water's chill creeps up your legs and makes your joints ache. You've learned to ignore the way your skin cracks, the way the smell never really leaves you. You've learned to just keep moving, keep working, because that's what it takes to survive. Once the rinsing is complete, it's time to prepare the fabric for the next steps. You look at the wool and see the dullness of it. Even after the soaking and rinsing, it still looks, well, it looks like wool, but not quite the vibrant white it should be. It's time for the fuller's secret weapon, the bleach. But don't think it's like the bleach you use in your modern-day laundry. There's no bright, fresh smell of clean here. No, the bleach of ancient Rome is sulfur. That's right, sulfur. But that's not all. In ancient Roman times, they would also rely heavily on the power of the sun. That's right. You've just signed up for a job that means hours of standing in the harsh sun, waiting for the chlorine-like fumes of sulfur to turn the fabric from dirty beige to brilliant white. It's a miserable process. Imagine being so close to the sun's heat that your skin burns while simultaneously inhaling the fumes of sulfur. It's enough to make you wish you could have just stayed in bed under your blanket of bugs. But you're here now, and there's no going back. And then there's drying. If you thought the work was tough so far, drying might just push you over the edge. This isn't a cozy afternoon in front of a clothes dryer. No. In ancient Rome, you're laying the wool out in the open courtyard, and the wind is your enemy. The wind might help dry the wool, but it also brings with it dust, debris, and the occasional pigeon who decides that your freshly washed toga is the perfect target for a bathroom break. As if that wasn't enough, the streets around the workshop are full of people, dogs, and carts. You don't want them to snatch your work, so you've got a slave standing by to shoo off the pests, both animal and human. They're there to guard your precious linens, though the smell of sweat, urine, and bleach is so strong that few will dare come close. But it's still stressful. You're constantly vigilant, watching your clothes dry while trying not to lose them to someone else's theft or a poorly aimed pigeon. You might think that once the drying's over, you can rest. But no, your day isn't over. After all the scrubbing, the rinsing, the sulfur, and the endless drying, you've still got to make the garments presentable. You'll need to press them into shape. No steam irons here. No. You're using your hands, paddles, and stretching frames to pull and shape the fabric into the smooth, polished appearance your clients demand. It's not pretty, and it's certainly not easy. But there's one last thing that hits you as the day winds down. Your hands are raw. You're covered in grime. The work is physically exhausting. The smell of urine, sulfur, and sweat is embedded in your skin. Your body aches. Your clothes are a mix of water and dirt. And yet, your clients will be happy. They'll wear their white, polished togas and tunics like they've just stepped out of a grand bathhouse, oblivious to the labor that went into making them pristine. And you'll start over tomorrow, because there's always more wool to wash, always more garments to scrub, rinse, and bleach. The cycle never ends. It's tough work, grimy work, but it's necessary. And somewhere, deep down, you know that without you, ancient Rome would be a much smellier place. Let's start with the first step, bleach. But not the bleach you know. You don't have chlorine in a bottle here. You don't even have a washing machine with a delicate setting. Instead, you're going to bleach fabrics using sulfur and the brutal power of the sun. This isn't your Sunday afternoon laundry. No, this is an industrial-scale, dangerous process that could go horribly wrong if you're not careful. The methods you're using have been around since the Romans figured out how to turn fabric that was the color of dirt into something resembling cleanliness. But let's just say the brilliance of the process is a little more literal than you'd like. The first ingredient is sulfur. Not just any sulfur, mind you. but the kind you dig up from the earth that's been sitting under volcanic rocks, smelling of rotten eggs. Yes, your bleach is literally a volcanic byproduct. You'll create a paste with sulfur and apply it to the fabric. If it were a recipe, it would say, take a generous helping of stench, a pinch of danger, and blend with the anticipation of possible blindness. What could go wrong? The sulfur not only burns like a summer's day on an unshaded roof, but also turns into a toxic gas. But don't worry. It's nothing that a little open air and a lot of stubbornness can't handle. If you're lucky, the sun will start doing its job, helping to lift stains and brighten the cloth. If you're unlucky, you'll end up with a cloth that smells worse than before. But wait, you're not done yet. No, because now you have to wait, which, in Roman times, is a game of patience. You must stretch the fabric over a rocky hillside, laying it out like an offering to the gods, hoping they'll forgive you for the whole sulfur fumes part. The Romans had the peculiar habit of laying out their textiles to bake in the sun. It's the equivalent of taking your laundry out into a desert and hoping for the best. But it's not just any desert. It's a Roman courtyard with dirt and dust flying all around. And, oh yes, birds. Do you remember those pigeons from earlier? Well, they're quite fond of your sheets too. Just wait until you've laid out your work for the day. And then, splat. There goes your pristine, freshly bleached fabric. Now, of course, things are never as simple as they sound, especially when it comes to working with fabrics in ancient Rome. The process is even more taxing than you could ever imagine. Think about this. You're using your bare hands to apply sulfur paste. If you're not careful, it'll burn your skin. The air is thick with fumes that can make your eyes water, and the cloth itself can become so tough and brittle from the sun that it feels like you're washing stone, not fabric. By the time your work is done, you've probably inhaled enough sulfur fumes to make you question whether you're bleaching the fabric or your lungs. And remember, this isn't a one-time job. You'll need to repeat this process several times to get the linens to a standard of cleanliness that will impress your wealthy Roman clientele. Yes, your very expensive, very important clients, who wouldn't dream of wearing the same tunic twice in a row, now expect you to work miracles on their garments. But miracles don't come cheap, especially when you're in the fuller's business. They come with sacrifices, such as potentially losing a bit of your eyesight from the toxic bleach or burning your hands in the process. So let's recap. You've smeared volcanic sulfur on fabric, let it dry in the harsh Roman sun, and prayed it doesn't fall prey to the local bird population. The next step? A rinse. But you can't just dunk it in a bucket of fresh water. Oh no, no. That would be too easy. Instead, you're probably going to dip it in a vat of urine. Yes, urine. The Romans believed urine was a great natural cleanser, mostly because of the ammonia content, and it works better than water in helping to bleach the fabric further. But here's the kicker. You'll need to walk it off for a while. That means stomping the fabric in the vat of urine. Yes, you're literally walking all over someone else's waste, crushing it into the fibers. This is not a simple rinse cycle. This is a workout. And not just for your arms. Oh no, it's for your legs, your feet, and potentially even your dignity. By now, you've learned a few things. That bleached fabric can come with a health warning. that the process might make you wonder if you're getting paid in clean air, and that the world is a much dirtier place than your modern laundry basket would ever suggest. But there's one more thing to keep in mind when you're bleaching fabrics in the Roman way. The fuller's trade isn't a job you get into because it's glamorous. It's not about looking good. It's about getting things clean, no matter the cost. Whether that's burning your hands or inhaling fumes that would make any modern chemist faint. You might think, why not just buy a detergent? Why not just build a washing machine? Well, that's not how ancient Rome rolls. They didn't have the luxury of taking a trip to the store to pick up a fresh bottle of OxyClean. What you get is what you make, at the cost of your lungs, your clothes, and possibly your sanity. And so, you stand there, looking at your freshly bleached tunic, feeling proud yet queasy, hoping that your work will be appreciated, not by the birds, not by the fumes, but by the Romans who will pay you with their hard-earned coin. That's what keeps you going, at least until the next batch of dirty laundry arrives. You've just woken up to another day in the Fullonica. The air is thick with the smell of urine, damp wool, and the faintest scent of sulfur, but at least you're used to it now. The tools of your trade are all around you. Vats full of liquid nastiness, wooden paddles for beating the cloth, and the endless stretch of fabric that seems to grow longer the more you try to finish. It's another day in the life of a fuller, and you can feel the aches in your joints before you even start. But there's something different about this morning. It's not the usual mix of groans and complaints from your fellow workers. No. This time, you hear it, faint at first, but growing louder as the day begins. A work song. The rhythmic chant of the fullers echoes through the workshop, keeping time as they scrub and stomp. The sounds blend together like a strange orchestra. The slap of wet wool, the scrape of wooden paddles, and then, somewhere in the back, a voice rises. It's not just a song. It's a heartbeat, a pulse of life in this sweaty, smelly environment. The work song is the song of labor, of sweat and toil, and it's as old as the craft itself. The fullers, like any workers of their time, need something to keep them moving, something to give them rhythm and pace as they battle with wool that never seems to end. These songs aren't just for morale. They're essential to the process. The chorus of fullers, whether they were slaves, freedmen, or low-status citizens, would have crooned together as they worked, a way to coordinate their movements, align their efforts, and keep the time as they stomped and scrubbed. It's not just a random act of joy. It's essential for productivity. In a world where time was money and labor was cheap, keeping the pace was everything. As you stand there, your feet submerged in the cool, urine-saturated vat, you can't help but get caught up in the beat. The rhythm pulls you in. Stomp, scrub, stomp, scrub. The sound of your fellow fuller's feet echoing against the wool creates a cadence that almost becomes hypnotic. Each step, taken in unison with those around you, ensures that the wool will be cleaned, that it will be ready to wear again. But it's also a signal of survival, of resilience, in the face of a job that most people wouldn't dare touch with a 10-foot pole. You might not even be aware of it, but you find your lips moving with the song. It's something you've heard before, something that's been sung in this workshop for as long as anyone can remember. Maybe there's even a bit of banter mixed in with the words. A jibe at a coworker's slow pace, a teasing remark about someone's dirty tunic, or a wordless nod to a friend across the room as the work moves along. The song helps keep the energy up, a sort of communal bond that connects everyone in this dirty, difficult work. And yet, as much as the song keeps you moving, there's a layer of something else beneath it all, a quiet camaraderie. The Fullers in this room, despite their status, their smells, and their endless labor, are still human beings. They're connected by more than just the smell of ammonia or the calluses on their hands. They are bound together by their shared fate and their shared rhythm. The work song serves as a reminder of their humanity, of their place in the world, even as they grind away at the wool. The songs aren't just sung in the Fulanica, of course. Labor songs were common across the Roman world, from the grain mills to the fields. Workers needed something to lift them through the daily grind. And while we don't have many direct records of these songs, we can imagine what they might have sounded like. The Romans loved their music, after all, and they had a talent for making even the most mundane tasks feel like epic feats. So there you are, stomping away, your feet cold and sore, but your body moving in rhythm with the rest of the crew. You glance over at your fellow Fullers, men and women alike, all caught in the same dance. It's not glamorous, it's not pretty, but it's life, and it's all you've got. The song carries you through, and before long, your back isn't aching quite as much, and the wool begins to take shape. There's something almost satisfying about it now. The familiar, worn groove you've fallen into. As the day drags on, the song drifts in and out of focus. You sing because you must, because it's part of the job, but also because it's what keeps you sane. The work is hard, the hours are long, and the smell is never going to leave you. But there's something almost sacred in the act of it. You are part of a long tradition, a thread in the fabric of Rome itself. The Fullers of Rome may have been the lowliest of the low in the eyes of society, but in that moment, within the bounds of your Fulanica, you are everything. You are part of something larger. You are part of the song. Roman Fullers were a vital part of the Roman economy, cleaning and preparing the garments worn by everyone from the lower classes to the elite. Their workshops, often located on the outskirts of cities, were grimy and crowded, and the work was both physically demanding and poorly regarded. Despite their essential role, Fullers were typically seen as lower-class laborers and often had to work with materials like urine and ash to clean the woolen garments. The rhythm of their labor was reflected in their songs, which were an essential part of the process. These work songs helped to coordinate the laborers' efforts, making the strenuous and monotonous work a bit more bearable. While there are no surviving texts of Fuller's songs, ancient sources refer to work songs in general, and it is believed that these songs were a way of reinforcing group cohesion and maintaining a sense of rhythm during the repetitive tasks. This practice wasn't unique to Fullers. Workers in other sectors, from farming to mining, also used songs to help maintain the pace and manage the physical and mental toll of their labor. The communal nature of these songs speaks to the sense of unity that these workers shared, even as they were relegated to the fringes of society. It's a beautiful morning, or at least it should be. The sun is out. There's a faint breeze fluttering the trees, and it's the perfect day for drying linens, Well, maybe not perfect, but it's the best you're going to get. The fuller's courtyard is buzzing with activity, but the air is thick with anticipation and anxiety because you've got a crucial task ahead. Today, you'll be drying those freshly washed togas, tunics, and sheets in the open air. And oh, what a spectacle it will be. If only everything would go according to plan. You've just scrubbed, stomped, and soaked these garments to perfection, and now it's time to let the wind work its magic. You've stretched and shaken them, but now the delicate operation of drying begins. The sun might be your ally, but the wind? The wind is an unpredictable, pesky creature, both your greatest enemy and your unlikely companion. On a good day, the wind dries everything quickly, leaving behind soft, fragrant cloth. On a bad day, well, let's just say there's a reason the Romans had a saying: if you can't deal with the wind, don't bother drying linen. As you hang each piece on a wooden line strung between two sturdy poles, there's a chance that some will catch in the breeze and sail across the courtyard like a ship caught in a storm. If you're unlucky, the wind will whip them straight into the neighboring garden, where you'll have to chase after them, swearing under your breath. Not exactly the dignified process one might imagine when it comes to laundering the clothes of Rome's elite. And then there's the matter of the pigeons. Oh, those pigeons. They think the togas hanging in the wind are just perfect perches, where they can puff out their feathers and survey the world below. When you're not looking, they'll land on your precious laundry and, well, leave their own little marks on your hard work. You'd swear they have it out for you, but they don't. They just like high places, and it's your linen that they'll always gravitate toward, like moths to a flame. Not only do you have to worry about the wind, but now you're also on constant lookout for these feathered vermin that take joy in your suffering. There's always that one pigeon, too, the cocky one. The one that waits for you to look away just long enough before swooping down and making its move. You catch it just in time, but by then, it's too late. A fresh stain. Back to square one, and your patience is thinner than the cloth you're drying. You sigh. The sun's getting higher in the sky, and the wind is picking up. You're standing there, scratching your head and mentally checking all the items on your list. First, the drying. Then, the swatting. And let's not forget the subtle art of warding off theft. Yes, theft. You see, in this world, when you've spent hours scrubbing, rinsing, and beating your body to exhaustion just to clean someone's dirty laundry, there's no honor among thieves. Only dirty linen. The thieves are subtle, though. They know that in this courtyard, you are the only one with an eye on the fabric, so they wait for the perfect moment. They've watched you hang up the togas, make sure everything's neat, and then they strike when your back is turned. Sometimes it's a stolen tunic, sometimes a woolen blanket. The good news is, they're not brazen enough to snatch your entire collection. The bad news is, they're getting bolder. And unless you're quick, or have an eye like a hawk, there's always something gone before you can catch it. To deal with this, you've been assigned a slave, and their sole purpose today is to swat the pests away from the laundry, while you try to hold your ground against the inevitable wind and pigeon assaults. They're not the happiest of employees. Most of them wouldn't be, considering their role as full-time bug swatters in this little corner of the Roman Empire. But they're a necessary evil. You've caught them napping before, sitting in the shade of the courtyard, pretending to be one with the wall as they avoid the swatting job they've been given. But then again, you can't exactly blame them. How much can a person take before the constant battle of the breeze, the pests, and the thieves becomes too much? The truth is, you'd rather not be doing this at all. You'd much rather be sitting in the shade somewhere, enjoying some semblance of peace and quiet, while someone else worries about the laundry. But here you are, standing in the center of the courtyard, your fingers slightly stiff from the cold morning, doing your best to maintain control of the situation as the wind picks up speed. You glance over at your slave, who is pretending to be incredibly invested in their bug-swatting duties. You're not buying it. They missed a whole section of the toga. There's a stubborn fly perched right on the hem. You'll deal with it later. Right now, you have more important things to worry about. Like the half-dressed man down the street eyeing your laundry from his perch on a wall. Great. Another potential thief. It's a chaotic life, but it's the life of a fuller, full of little inconveniences, subtle dangers, and constant vigilance. The drying process, far from peaceful, is one of high anxiety. You're too busy watching for the wind to blow everything away, the pigeons to attack, and the thieves to make their move. It's a balancing act that tests your nerves, your patience, and your sense of humor. And all of this just to make sure some senator's toga looks fresh enough to wear for their next speech. When you think about it like that, it's hard not to laugh at the absurdity of it all. And yet, you keep going, because at the end of the day, the togas must be dry. You've been ankle-deep in fermented urine all morning. Your feet have gone wrinkled. Your toenails are a distant memory. And the arches of your feet feel like they've personally insulted the gods. You are, proudly and unfortunately, a fuller. But stomping cloth in a noxious bath isn't the end of your noble labor. Because now, it's time to make that fabric fabulous. Welcome to phase 2 of your day. Shaping, stretching, and smoothing wool without the luxury of an iron, a steamer, or even a hot rock, and certainly without applause. You squelch out of the tread vat, trailing drips of what once was liquid ammonia and what now is your shadow. Your skin is chapped. Your patience is thinner than the cloth you're about to torture into perfection. Because while others might believe your job ends with cleaning, the true finish line of your toil is presentation. And the Romans? They had standards. The fabric you've just stomped for hours isn't going to drape itself like a senator's toga. That's your job. You, the humble fuller, are also a sculptor of textiles. So, get ready. Because now begins the peculiar dance of ancient textile geometry. First, the paddle. Yes, a paddle. Not for boating, not for spanking. This one is for smacking wool until it lies flat and compliant. The tool looks innocent enough. Smooth wood, maybe a handle rubbed shiny from years of calloused hands. But in your world, it's the scepter of your small and soggy kingdom. You lift a length of damp wool, heavy, sullen, reluctant, and lay it on the wooden bench outside the workshop. The sun is out, praise the gods, so at least your fabric won't mold today. With one foot bracing the edge and your back hunched like a question mark, you begin. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Each slap rings out like a rhythmic chant of low-level violence. Paddling cloth serves a real purpose. It softens fibers, drives out excess moisture, and begins the flattening process. but it's also deeply satisfying in a way that suggests repressed emotions are being taken out on wool. You hit the cloth like it insulted your mother, and then you hit it again for good measure. Once sufficiently beaten into submission, the fabric is moved to the stretching frame. This is no delicate embroidery hoop. It's a monstrous wooden rack that looks suspiciously like something an inquisitor might use on a bad day. You clamp the cloth at every edge, pulling it taut like a drum. The idea is to reshape it into the dimensions and drape desired, especially if you're trying to mold the cloth into fashionable pleats or flowing folds. Now here's where things get oddly scientific. You reach for your chalk. Not the colored stuff kids use on sidewalks, no. This is Fuller's chalk. Soft, crumbly, naturally absorbent. It's mined from earth and sacred to your trade. You rub it into the fabric with expert precision. Why? Because chalk absorbs oils and moisture and gives the cloth a matte, smooth finish that screams expensive, even if it was worn by someone who's never bathed without a servant. You're not just laundering, you're laundering with flair. Romans were deeply into aesthetics. Draping mattered. Clean lines mattered. Fabric that looked like it could walk off the loom and into a marble villa mattered. So you aren't just scrubbing stains and stretching hems. You're shaping image, status, and style. Sometimes, if a client is particularly picky, a priest with a ceremonial tunic, a merchant's wife demanding flawless pleats, you'll spend hours tweaking the fabric, readjusting the clamps, dusting on more chalk, running your fingers along the weave like a blind sculptor feeling for imperfections. And yes, you do all this while reeking of yesterday's sweat, today's urine, and a future no one wants to think too hard about. Your hands, meanwhile, tell the story. The skin is rough as old rope. Your nails are chipped and constantly chalk-caked. Sometimes the fabric fights back with invisible barbs, tiny wool splinters that dig into your knuckles. But you persist, because there are no second chances in cloth finishing. Once it's dry, the shape is locked. Mess it up now, and your client's toga will fall in sad droops that scream provincial disappointment. There's an art to symmetry in pleats. There's a rhythm to it. You learn to measure with your eyes, to align by instinct, to know when fabric will dry slightly shorter or when it'll warp if you don't keep pulling it flat during the sun's peak. And the sun is your only assistant in this matter. There are no heated rollers, no laundry rooms with constant climate control. If a cloud rolls in, if a breeze shifts, if the goat decides to chew on the hem, you're back to square one. You've had to chase dogs off the cloth, throw rocks at meddling children, and once even slap a rooster who strutted across a pleated tunic like he owned it. All in the name of making someone else look crisp and pristine. You're still not done, though. Once dried, some fabrics need a final touch. Oiling. Just a whisper of olive oil, rubbed into certain garments to keep them supple and slightly glossy. Of course, too much, and it looks like the wearer rolled in salad. Too little, and the cloth cracks like old bark. And finally, you lift the completed garment from the rack. It's light now, airy even. It no longer resembles the sodden beast you wrestled out of the tread vat. It drapes, it folds, it flows. It's ready to be worn by someone who will never know how many paddles, clamps, chalk smears, and sweat beads went into making their wool look dignified. You'll hand it over with your head low. You won't be thanked. You definitely won't be paid much. but in some small way, you've shaped the image of Rome today. And tomorrow, you'll do it all over again. The sun hasn't yet risen over the rooftops of Rome, but the Follonica is already alive with activity. The rhythmic squelching of feet stomping cloth in vats of aged urine echoes through the narrow alleyways. The pungent aroma wafts through the air, a blend of ammonia and damp wool, announcing your presence before you're even seen. As a fuller, your work is essential. Without you, the pristine togas of senators and the vibrant tunics of merchants would lose their luster. Yet, despite the necessity of your labor, society regards you with disdain. Your profession is synonymous with filth, and the stench clings to you like a second skin, impervious to soap or scrubbing. The Follonica, your workplace, is strategically located on the outskirts of the city center. This placement isn't coincidental. It's a deliberate attempt to keep the malodorous processes of fulling at a distance from the more refined areas of Rome. While your services are in high demand, the elite prefer not to be reminded of the unsavory methods involved in maintaining their immaculate appearances. Social interactions are fraught with subtle slights. In the marketplace, vendors wrinkle their noses as you approach, and fellow citizens give you a wide berth. Children are warned to keep their distance, lest they catch the fuller's stench. Even in communal baths, your presence is met with sidelong glances and whispered comments. Despite the social stigma, fullers have established a sense of community among themselves. Guilds, such as the Corpus Fontanorum in Ostia, provide support and camaraderie. These associations not only offer mutual aid, but also serve as a collective voice, advocating for the interests of fullers in the broader society. In Pompeii, the Fullers Guild even dedicated a statue to Eumachia, a prominent public priestess and patroness, highlighting the profession's significance despite its low social standing. The legal system, too, acknowledges the importance of your work. Laws regulate the fulling process, ensuring quality and accountability. Fullers are held responsible for the garments entrusted to them. Any damage or loss can result in penalties. This legal oversight underscores the paradox of your profession: indispensable yet disdained. Religion offers a semblance of solace. Many fullers worship Minerva, the goddess of wisdom and crafts. During the festival of Quinquetrus, workshops are adorned with decorations, and rituals are performed to seek the goddess's favor. These religious observances provide a sense of dignity and purpose, a reminder that your labor, though maligned, holds divine significance. Yet, the societal disdain remains ever present. Your profession is a constant reminder of the delicate balance between necessity and revulsion. You are the unseen hand that maintains the city's facade of cleanliness and order, all while being relegated to its periphery. In the grand tapestry of Rome, fullers occupy a paradoxical position, essential yet ostracized, visible in their contributions, yet invisible in social standing. Your neighbors may think you're filthy, but without you, the very fabric of Roman society would unravel. Even during the break, when you venture out to find bread, the scrutiny trails behind. The baker serves with swift hands and a stiff spine. Every exchange is brief, coins passed with fingers that hesitate. The weight of the transaction is not in bronze, but in avoidance. People do not meet your eyes for long. They do not linger beside you. Your presence is a signal to move. Your profession has its guilds, its protections, its ancient respect, but none of that matters in the micro-rituals of public disdain. You are unclean, not ritually, not spiritually, socially. No law condemns you, but the city does. It closes its face to you. It tightens around your absence. There is no defense, no explanation. The wool is cleaner because of your labor. The togas are brighter. The tunics are purified. The linens hang immaculate on noble shoulders, kissed by the sun and blessed by your soaking vats. And still, you are filth. It's a paradox that doesn't resolve. They need your labor. They hate your hands. On the walk back to the workshop, you catch the scent of perfume, floral and sharp, coming from a passing woman. She drifts by with the casual poise of someone whose fabric has never seen your workshop, but it has. You recognize the finish on her shawl, the lift of the wool, brushed and fluffed to a fine halo. The scent is a mask. Beneath it is your work, made invisible and luxurious. She never knew. She never wanted to. The alley bends back toward the Pholonica. You hear water sluicing, wool slapping, workers muttering. The rhythm picks up again. The tools welcome your hands like they belong. Your body moves into its labor, not out of obligation, but familiarity. You do not resent the stink. It is the architecture of your trade. But the neighbors, the ones who hold their breath when you pass, who trace their fingers in the air to ward off unseen curses, they do not care about trade. They care about status. And to them, you are not just a worker. You are an infection. Evening drapes itself slowly over the rooftops. The city takes on that cooling breath, the one that washes away the noise but not the judgment. The alley empties, doors shut, lamps flicker behind shutters. Somewhere nearby, incense is lit, meant to drive out the stench of daily life. You know the type. It's usually lit after your footsteps fade from earshot. Inside the Pholonica, bundles of wet cloth still glisten. Tomorrow they will be scrubbed again and again. Perfection demands repetition. There is dignity in that, but no celebration. You return home the same way you left, by shadow, by habit, by silence. The neighbors close their windows when they hear you coming. They think you are filthy, and perhaps you are, but only because your hands do the cleansing they would never dare. You're standing in the warm stink of a back alley in Rome, trying to hold a sloshing bucket of public urine without getting any on your tunic. Spoiler, it's not working. The day began like most others. The sky glowed the color of ash. The streets were already busy with the slap of sandals on stone, and your body ached from yesterday's labor. But this morning, you're not just a fuller. You're a man on a mission to collect other people's pee. You stop by the public latrines, the foracae. Big communal things lined up with long stone benches. There's no privacy, of course. Men talk business while they go, passing gossip across the stalls. You nod to the regulars, dip your bucket in the runoff trough, and try not to gag. The smell is rich, sharp, ammoniac, deep enough to burn the edges of your nostrils. You've grown used to it. Sort of. But before you can go, before you can lug your catch of the day back to the Pholonica, you have to pay. Because you're not just collecting waste, you're paying taxes on it. Welcome to one of the strangest taxes in Roman history, the vectigal urinae, the urine tax. Let's rewind for a second. It's around 70 CE. Emperor Vespasian has just taken power, the empire is strapped for cash, and the public treasury is thirstier than ever. He needs revenue, and fast, so he taxes waste. More specifically, he places a levy on the collection of urine from public urinals, the kind used by fullers like you. Why? Because urine isn't just waste, it's money. Liquid gold in a very smelly disguise. See, ancient Roman urine contains high concentrations of ammonia, a powerful cleaning agent. You use it to strip grease from wool, bleach tunics, and even whiten togas, so every drop counts, and the emperor knows it. Thus, the urine tax is born. It's not you, the poor fuller, who gets taxed directly. It's the owners of the public latrines, the ones who sell the urine to fullers and leather workers. But guess what? The cost trickles down. Always. So you pay. A small cut, a few sestertii here and there. Nothing enormous, but still, it adds up. Every time you scoop that bucket, part of what you're collecting is Roman bureaucracy. P has become policy. And not everyone's happy about it. There's a famous story, maybe apocryphal, maybe not, about Vespasian's son, Titus. He apparently wrinkled his nose at the whole thing. "Really, father?" he says. "You're making money off human waste?" So Vespasian tosses him a coin from the tax revenue and asks, "Do you smell anything?" Titus replies, "No." And the emperor famously quips, "Pecunia non olet." Money doesn't stink. Easy for him to say. For you, a common fuller, the stink is very real. You can't afford to buy perfume, and even if you could, it wouldn't cover the bite of soaked wool and fermented urea. But you keep working, because this is your craft, because this is your lot, and yes, because you need the pee. As you trudge back to the workshop, dodging carts and beggars, you pass a few kids holding their noses. They snicker as you go by. You're used to it. Everyone mocks the fuller until they need their tunic cleaned. Back in the Phalonica, you empty your bucket into the soak vat. The linen inside has already started to yellow, stained by whatever nobleman's feast it had the misfortune of witnessing. You stir the mixture with a paddle. The fumes waft up. You blink, eyes watering. No one else is talking. Just the wet slap of cloth, the bubbling of old piss, and the dull scrape of sandals on stone. The air is thick with it. You could bottle this scent and declare war with it. And yet, there's an odd pride in what you do. You are the invisible engine behind Rome's polished image. You make the marble white togas shine. You give senators their gleam. You wash away the muck of daily life so others can pretend it never existed. At least until it's time for their next visit to the Foraci. Still, it's hard not to laugh at the absurdity of it all. That somewhere, up in the imperial palace, men are counting coins from the contents of your vat. That your suffering is a line item in the imperial budget. That you, a man who bathes in ammonia, are part of an economic system. Later that evening, you pass by the marketplace and hear someone say it again. Pecunia non olet. It's a joke now, a saying. The coins may not stink, but you do. You walk home in silence, bucket empty, hands sore. The smell will follow you into bed. It always does. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, you'll pay for pee again. In 70 CE, Emperor Vespasian of Rome introduced the urine tax, vectigal urinae, as a pragmatic response to a strained imperial treasury following civil war. Public latrines collected urine in large quantities, which trades, like fullers and tanners, relied on for its ammonia content, a natural detergent and chemical agent essential for processing wool and leather. Though the tax technically applied to the vendors of the urine, not the workers directly, the cost inevitably trickled down. Vespasian's son, Titus, famously criticized this foul-sounding levy. In response, Vespasian held a coin to his nose and asked, "Does it stink?" coining the enduring Latin phrase pecunia non olet, money does not stink, still used today to justify profits from unsavory sources. Far from being a bizarre anecdote, this policy exemplifies the Roman Empire's brutal efficiency. If something could be monetized, even bodily waste, it would be. Let us settle into the world of regulation in ancient Rome. Not the clamor of the forum, nor the fiery speeches of senators, but the soft rustle of papyrus scrolls, the gentle clink of wax seals, and the slow, deliberate pace of Roman bureaucracy. In the world of laundry, yes, even laundry, there were rules, and where there are rules, there are consequences. Welcome to the calm and ordered domain of the Roman fuller's legal life. The fullers of Rome, known as fulones, were not merely washers of cloth. They were part of a complex economic and social system where their work was seen as essential, yet their presence was heavily monitored. A good fuller could elevate the appearance of a magistrate's toga. A careless one could ruin it, and ruin himself in the process. You see, ancient Roman law was deeply invested in the daily operations of labor. Laundry was not exempt. A fuller's shop, called a fullonica, was both a workplace and a regulated entity. These were not casual enterprises. They operated under imperial oversight and, in time, became connected to professional guilds that answered to Roman law. Guilds, known in Latin as collegia, provided some protection for skilled workers, but they also ensured uniformity and standards. By the time of the late Republic and early Empire, the Collegium Fullinum, or Fuller's Guild, had emerged in several cities, including Pompeii and Ostia. Their purpose was both economic and civic. They organized fees, supervised apprentices, and enforced codes of conduct, codes often reinforced by local magistrates. Mistakes, however minor they might seem to the modern eye, could carry weighty consequences. If a fuller used too much sulfur in the whitening process, or if the urine-based wash left clothing brittle or stained, he could be held liable, particularly if the garments belonged to someone of social importance. Toga maintenance was no small matter. Legal inscriptions discovered on stone tablets and walls inform us that disputes over damaged clothing were not uncommon. Complaints could be brought before local officials, and, in the worst cases, fines could be levied. A fuller might even be barred from practicing if his offenses were deemed harmful to the reputation of the trade. Thus, the act of washing became, in many respects, a legal performance. In the city of Pompeii, whose ruins have given us valuable evidence of fullers' lives, at least 3 fullonicae were identified as substantial businesses. These shops had specialized rooms for cleaning, rinsing, drying, and pressing garments. And because these establishments affected public hygiene and waste disposal, they were subject to civic laws regulating where wastewater could be dumped. Violating these rules could draw sharp penalties, and in some cases, force a business to shut down. much of a fuller's day was spent not just in physical labor, but in careful compliance, measuring out additives, tracking the sources of their water and urine, often collected from public urinals, ensuring that waste did not spill into the wrong street or drain. Even the positioning of the shop's entrance had legal implications, especially if it disrupted the public path or caused offense to neighboring homes. The Emperor Hadrian, known for his administrative reforms, is believed to have supported standardizing trade laws across the empire. This would have affected fullers as well, bringing them under more centralized scrutiny. By codifying expectations and penalties, the Roman state made laundry a profession that, while humble, bore legal responsibility. In time, the guilds would serve not only as a professional community, but as a legal buffer. They could argue on behalf of a member. They could settle disputes internally, but even guild membership could not always shield a fuller from civic retribution. If you mishandled a senator's robes or failed to return them promptly, you could face public shame, or worse, economic ruin. It is important to remember, too, that the law affected fullers differently based on their social status. Many fullers were freedmen or slaves. Freedmen, those who had once been enslaved, often ran shops with great diligence, knowing that their rights, though improved, remained fragile. Slaves had no legal autonomy. If a slave fuller made an error, his master bore the blame and might suffer both financial and social consequences. This tension added another layer of quiet pressure to every task. Though we think of laundry as mundane, the Romans saw it as a matter of trust and reputation. A sullied garment could suggest personal carelessness. A delayed return could insult a patron. Therefore, to work as a fuller was to carry the burden of public appearance, not one's own, but that of others. You were the invisible hand behind the clean line of a senator's robe, the silent custodian of someone else's dignity. And so, the law watched, not with dramatic punishments or gaudy spectacles, but with ledgers, scrolls, and civic oaths, the daily grind of regulation, the murmur of responsibility, a world where every bucket poured, every cloth beaten in a tread vat, every garment hung to dry, was shadowed by the awareness that one wrong move could be more than a stain. It could be a summons. As dusk fell in Roman towns, fullers might sit quietly, counting coins, measuring soapstone, or reviewing orders for the next day. But always, in the back of their minds, was the knowledge that the law did not sleep. It stirred gently, like a magistrate with a long memory, waiting. And in this way, the laundry trade, earthy, pungent, relentless, was also a mirror of Rome's vast system of order. A single shop could be a microcosm of the state, organized, hierarchical, regulated, and always watched. You carry the stench of your labor like a second skin. The smell is layered. It's not just one thing. It's the musk of old wool steeped in yesterday's grime. It's the sour punch of human sweat fermented in Roman summer. It's the flat tang of wet limestone and chalk residue from the cloth you beat. But above all, it's ammonia. Urine, to be clear. Human urine. Fresh is bad. Aged is worse. Your shop collects it in jars from the public latrines. Some people are even paid for their pee. Yes, really. A nice incentive from Emperor Vespasian, who taxed urine collection and gave us that charming phrase, pecunia non olet. Money doesn't stink. Easy for him to say. He didn't have to stomp barefoot in it every day. See, the secret to whitening togas and making tunics soft isn't olive oil or soap. It's a chemical reaction, a magic trick almost. The ammonia in stale urine loosens the oils in wool. You trample the cloth in shallow vats filled with this yellow potion, mixing it with water and fuller's earth. Then you rinse it, bleach it, dry it, over and over again. So every day you stand ankle deep in what might generously be called a soup, and more accurately called a disease waiting to happen. Every day your legs sting from cuts you don't remember getting. Every day your hands go raw, red, then numb. And somewhere along the way, the smell stops being something you wear. It becomes who you are. You don't wash it off because you can't. Ammonia binds with the oils in your skin. It gets into your fingernails, into the cracks of your calluses, into the folds of your nose. It leaches into your tunic, which you can't afford to wash properly. It settles into your hair, your mouth, your bed sheets, such as they are. You try perfumes, not the fancy oils the upper classes dab on their temples, but little tricks: myrtle water, crushed herbs, vinegar rinses. But none of it helps. You just end up smelling like lavender and pee. And here's the thing. Romans valued cleanliness, public baths, shaved bodies, perfumed oils. But that didn't extend to you. You are the unspoken contradiction in their obsession with purity. You're the one who gets dirty so others can look clean. So, naturally, people avoid you. They turn their heads when you pass. They joke about the wind changing. Some won't sit near you in the tavern. A few even cross themselves, as if your odor were contagious. One man claims his dog died after licking your foot. You weren't even barefoot that day. Your clients, the wealthy ones, pretend not to notice. They hand you their tunics at arm's length, wrapped in cloth as if that does anything. When they come to collect, they compliment the whiteness, but not the worker. At best, you're invisible. At worst, you're the punchline of every Roman joke about filth. And still, you do the job. Because someone has to. Because your family needs the denarii. Because your cousin got caught stealing apples and now works in the mines, and you'd rather smell bad than die coughing black dust. Because this is the only trade your father knew, and the only one you'll pass on if your son lives long enough. So on your one day off, if Jupiter is kind and your master isn't watching, you try to scrub it out. You go to the baths. You sit in the caldarium and try not to hiss as the steam hits your sores. You scrape yourself with a strigil. You pay extra for a splash of oil. Just this once. But when you leave, towel wrapped around you, clothes tied in a bundle, someone frowns and moves away. And when you walk home past the fountain, a child pinches her nose again. Fulling is a dangerous trade, not in the dramatic, sword fight in the street kind of way. No, your kind of danger is slower, subtler, death by 1,000 rashes, respiratory collapse that begins with a little cough and ends with being carried out. Of the Phalanca, wrapped in the same fabric you were cleaning. See, stale urine wasn't just a minor detail of the job. It was the job. The ammonia in it acts like an ancient bleach, stripping oils and dirt from the wool, whitening it with a potency that would make your lungs beg for mercy. Every breath down here tastes metallic. Every inhalation is a wager your lungs might lose. The stronger the stench, the more effective the chemical reaction. At least, that's what the master says. And there are the fumes. acidic vapors that rise up from the hot vats like the breath of an angry titan. You've watched boys faint from it, their heads lolling over the rim of the tub before they slump into the steaming broth. Some wake up, some don't. And still, the vats must bubble. Your skin peels in places you'd rather not speak of. Hands blistered from wringing and scrubbing, cuticles cracked, scabbed, sometimes infected. You started with gloves, leather scraps passed down from someone who probably died in them. But they dissolved in the piss after a week. Now it's just raw hand against raw cloth, day in and day out. And no, there are no breaks, no shift changes. You get a crust of bread, maybe a few olives if your wife is in a good mood and someone dropped a coin near her market stall. You squat in a corner and eat, while flies buzz around the vats like tiny, drunk priests giving last rites. The worst part? No one cares. Not really. You're invisible to the very people whose robes you scrub. The senator's wife wears her white stola to temple, praises the gods, and turns her nose at the fullers who made her look divine. She'd faint if she saw what her garments had been dunked in. But disease doesn't care if you're invisible. In fact, it prefers it. Skin infections are just the beginning. Foot rot, heat boils, fungal outbreaks. The Greek physician Galen once said the lungs are offended by the vapors of filth. You'd like to write that on a wall somewhere, maybe near the bathhouse, where men of rank lounge while you drown in linen and urine. Your neighbor in the workshop, Marcus, hasn't been breathing right for weeks. He coughs pink foam sometimes. You've started sidestepping his splashes. But even you know the truth. There's no help for any of this. The local healer might offer crushed sage leaves or maybe a prayer. But when your breath is short and your chest tightens, no amount of herbs will save you. The gods didn't design humans to breathe ammonia 10 hours a day. And when your body gives out, there's no pension, no resting place with a headstone. Your co-workers might pitch in for a pine box, but chances are your name fades by next market day. There's always another poor fool with strong legs and a dull sense of smell, willing to take your place. Still, you keep working, because what's the alternative? Begging on the street? Starving in the hills? Fulling pays. Not well, but reliably. And in Rome, that's something, even if the payment is slowly killing you. Sometimes you think about walking away, heading to the port and catching a ship to somewhere, anywhere. But the work holds you, not out of loyalty or pride, out of exhaustion. You're too tired to imagine something else. So you do what fullers have always done. You shut your mouth, you scrub, you stomp, and you try not to breathe too deep. Because in this line of work, even your lungs can betray you. But the very element that made the job effective also made it dangerous. Constant inhalation of ammonia fumes could scar the lungs, and historical figures like Galen, the famed Roman physician, explicitly warned of the health damage caused by prolonged exposure to chemical vapors in trades such as fulling. Respiratory ailments, wheezing, chronic coughing, and even early death were occupational norms rather than exceptions. The work environment itself was a perfect storm of physical hazard. Archaeological sites like the well-preserved Fullenica in Pompeii show deep vats, stone floors, poor ventilation, and little separation between work and rest. Slipping hazards, standing in liquid for hours, and handling urine-soaked textiles without protection meant that fullers often suffered from foot infections, skin disorders, and blisters that festered into chronic wounds. What made it worse was the societal invisibility. Despite laundering the clothes of Rome's elite, fullers were socially marginalized due to the filth and odors associated with their trade. The people they served rarely acknowledged their labor, and few would dare shake a fuller's hand or eat in his presence. Their health deteriorated in silence, their injuries dismissed, and their deaths unrecorded in the grand histories of Rome. Yet the fullers endured, because someone had to, because garments didn't clean themselves, and because for many, it was fulling or starving. You wake up before the sun, as usual. Your hands already ache from yesterday, and your back threatens mutiny. The vat fumes haven't even started rising yet, and still, you can taste the sharp tang of ammonia in the air. But today's different. You've been summoned. Not by a slave, not by a merchant, but by a senator. He's not inviting you to dinner. Don't be ridiculous. No. He wants his toga cleaned, silk trimmed, white as virtue. At least it's supposed to be. In its current state, it's a grimy, sweat-glazed drape, heavy with secrets. He says he needs it by morning for a session in the forum. And then, casually, he adds, "If you find anything in the hem, don't ask." You've learned not to ask. Because in Rome, laundry is never just laundry. It's a confession, a relic, a breadcrumb trail. Every tunic has a story, and every story has a stain. You're not just scrubbing out grime. You're erasing affairs, betrayals, and late-night miscalculations soaked in wine and panic. You don't read scrolls or eavesdrop in temples. You read linen, and what it tells you, quietly, is that power is messier than it looks. It's not uncommon now. Magistrates bring in their robes after late meetings that went longer than they should have. Priests send temple garments that smell suspiciously of strong drink. Soldiers, well, their tunics always carry more blood than you care to identify. You clean them all. You always clean. But you also remember. The Fullonica, your humble workshop of vats, bricks, and stink, isn't just a place for suds and scrubbing anymore. It's a place where gossip floats heavier than steam, a place where conversations happen just out of earshot, but not far enough to miss. You don't ask to hear things. You simply do. And no one guards their tongue around a fuller. To them, you're furniture, a background prop in their play, conveniently invisible. But that's where your power lies, in being overlooked. Because while you're invisible, you're also everywhere, and people talk around you like you don't exist, but you do, and you're listening. One morning, 2 men from the magistrate's office argue in your back room while waiting on their fresh linen. One speaks of a grain shipment that vanished. The other suggests it might return for a price. You're wringing a tunic nearby, your fingers red and cracked from lime and soap, acting as if the thread count demands your full attention. But your ears are wide open. Later, the tunic is cleaned, folded, and returned. The transaction is done. The information isn't. Your reputation spreads, not as a blackmailer, not as a schemer, but as someone who can be trusted, or at least someone who doesn't speak. And in Rome, that's a rare and valuable trait. Soon, slaves from wealthier households begin arriving with subtle bribes. An extra apple here, a copper coin slipped into the folds. all for the same request: discretion. Even when you're not sure what you're supposed to be quiet about, you understand the shape of silence. Sometimes it smells like perfume that shouldn't be on a senator's tunic. Sometimes it's the blood pattern that doesn't match a hunting accident. Sometimes it's the fact that the same priest keeps returning with sheets dirtied from more than spilled wine. You never confront, never accuse. You just clean. Always clean. And the more you clean, the more they rely on you. This is the political theater of laundry. You're the backstage hand, scrubbing out the sins that keep the public masks clean. You're not invited to the banquets or parades, but your hands prepared the garments for them. You made the toga gleam white. You bleached out the stains that could have cost a man his office. But power is a double-edged strigil. One afternoon, a slave rushes in, breathless, clutching a tunic with reddish smears along the hem. "From a sheep," he insists. "Spilled wine and lamb's blood." You nod. You soak it. You scrape it. But the blood has that tacky resistance. The kind that doesn't come from livestock. You clean it anyway. Weeks later, you hear whispers. The master of that household, gone. No body, no explanation. You remember the pattern of that stain like a map etched in memory, but you say nothing. That's not your role. In Rome, the people who clean up are never thanked, but they're often feared because they know too much. And so you remain, a quiet presence among the vats, both servant and sentinel. You know the language of fibers and the truth hidden in hems. You don't call yourself political. You don't give speeches or write proclamations. But you're part of the machinery. You oil the gears with sweat and steam. And occasionally, you tighten a bolt that keeps the whole contraption from flying apart. No one votes for you. No one cheers you in the forum. But the city runs because you keep its costumes clean. By late morning, the air inside the Follonica thickens. It clings to skin and clothes like a second, wetter garment. The heavy stench of ammonia rises from the vats again, sharper now under the midday sun. The fumes sting the eyes, bite the throat, and burn the lungs in slow, invisible ways. Beneath the splashing of feet and the scrape of cloth against stone, there's a rhythm to it all, as if the filth moves with its own sacred pulse. The fullers move in practiced silence, except for the occasional barked command or tired cough. All around, tunics and togas sway on hemp lines, dripping in rows like Roman flags mourning their own cleanliness. The mosaic tiles beneath the feet have lost their pattern from grime and use. But in the corners, one can still make out tiny floral designs. Small hints that even filth once had grandeur. No priest would ever enter a Follonica. No senator's son would ever apprentice here. Yet the garments of priests and senators still arrive, folded neatly in baskets or wrapped in cloth. They arrive after sacrifices, after rituals, after long processions under the scorching sun. They arrive heavy with sweat, with oil, with ash. And they all arrive for the same reason. In Rome, filth is not just a matter of odor or appearance. Dirt is a spiritual weight. It pollutes the soul as much as the body. Before a man may approach the gods, before he may cross the threshold of a temple or offer grain to the household lares, his clothes must be pure, not merely clean, but ritually untouched by human stain. The fibers must be lightened, the oils removed, the smells neutralized. Without that, his prayer holds no value. And so the garments are brought to the fullers, carried by slaves or discreet household boys, rarely by their owners, and never with a word of gratitude. The fullers take them without ceremony, unfold them, and plunge them into the basin of warmed urine, where sacred and profane become inseparable. Some of the linens arrive from the temple of Vesta itself, white robes once worn by the Vestal virgins, sacred tenders of Rome's eternal flame, robes that have passed through fire, incense, and worship, now soaked and stomped by feet, blackened with soot and lye. There is no irony in it, not in this city, just necessity, for even sacred things grow dirty. In the corner, a young apprentice scrapes the residue from a tunic using a shard of pumice. His knuckles are raw, fingers red to the nail beds, but his strokes are even. There is pride in his work, even if no one speaks of it. Among the fullers, they know what they are. They do not need to be reminded. They carry the spiritual burden of others in their tubs. Outside, bells echo from a nearby shrine. Another procession begins. A senator walks the stone path in a bleached white toga, laurel at his brow. His garment gleams under the sun. The crowd steps aside with reverence. There are petals scattered before him, incense burning at the altar. But back inside the Fulanica, the master fuller already knows the secret. He cleaned that toga 3 days ago. It had a wine stain across the hem and a streak of horse dung up the back. It had smelled like dead figs. He had scrubbed it, rinsed it, hung it, folded it, and now it graces the body of a man who prays for the favor of Jupiter. There is no glory in that, but there is satisfaction. The fullers do not appear in poems. They are not invoked during oaths, but their touch lingers on every sacred cloth in the city. They serve without blessing, without title, without thanks. Yet nothing sacred proceeds without their labor. There is an old superstition whispered among older workers that the gods favor the fullers more than they let on, that they see the sacrifice in burned hands, in cracked feet, in eyes red from lye vapors, that perhaps it is the fullers who make holiness possible. A private thought, never spoken aloud in front of a client, but passed between apprentices and masters, like a prayer no one dares to write down. The sun dips lower. Another batch of tunics soak in fresh liquid, its color betraying its source. It's been collected from public urinals, street pots, even amphorae lined up behind taverns. It ferments just enough to unlock the magic. Ammonia, Rome's sacred cleaner. Even the emperor's linens aren't above it. No toga has ever been made holy without first being made filthy. In the back room, freshly cleaned linens are folded and tied in bundles. Their edges are stiff, the fibers brittle but bright. They will be delivered to the temples by morning. Drapes for altars, tunics for priests, shawls for statues of the gods. Everything white, everything spotless. Not one fiber reveals the stink, the filth, the hands that worked them. The Fulanica erases itself from the final product. The divine begins where the fuller ends. Evening falls. The streets outside swell with returning workers, smoke curling up from cookpots and oil lamps. In the Fulanica, the fires are doused. The floors are sluiced with water. The air, while still pungent, softens with night. The fullers rest, not in glory, but in the knowledge that they have, in some unseen way, helped Rome speak to its gods. In ancient Rome, religious life placed heavy emphasis on ritual purity. Before participating in temple worship, Romans were expected to cleanse themselves and present themselves in clean garments. It's another blistering day in ancient Rome, and your hands are soaked in the same liquid you'd usually avoid at all costs: urine. It's warm, it's pungent, and it's all you have. As a fuller, this is your life. You scrub, stomp, and squeeze wool in vats filled with urine, turning what would be an offense in most other professions into a sacred ritual. Yes, sacred. How's that for a plot twist? But here's the kicker. This wasn't just about cleanliness or the seemingly magical properties of urine. The fullers had gods to thank, or rather, gods they asked for favors, hoping that the mix of ancient grime and divine protection would transform their humble, foul-smelling craft into something close to blessed. The gods of soap and urine were real, and their presence loomed over the stinking vats and grinding work. In the world of the Fullenica, the act of cleaning was more than a chore. It was a connection to the divine, however strange that sounds. Now, before you picture a Roman priest hovering over a vat of laundry with a tiny incense burner, let me explain. In ancient Roman religion, gods and spirits were attached to every aspect of life. Some were easy to spot, like Jupiter, the king of the gods, or Venus, goddess of love. But others? They were far more niche, like the god of fleas, or in this case, the household god of cleaning. Roman fullers, who spent their days elbow-deep in everything from feces-stained togas to the sweat-soaked tunics of soldiers, had their own patron deities. These gods were often household spirits, local, personal, and practical. Think of them as the Roman version of your everyday cleaning products, but with a lot more mysticism thrown in. These divine helpers, usually represented by small figurines or painted on the walls of Fulanikai workshops, were honored with offerings, usually small burnt pieces of food, flowers, or coins, placed next to the vats or washing areas. The gods of the fullers were practical, if somewhat grimy. After all, they helped scrub away sins. Fullers didn't just wash for cleanliness, they washed for purity. Roman culture tied cleanliness directly to moral purity, and the act of washing and cleaning, whether with urine or soap, was seen as a way of cleansing the soul. You weren't just making your clients' clothes look new again. You were spiritually resetting them, preparing them for the day ahead, making them worthy of entering sacred spaces. That's a lot of weight to put on your hands as you scrub away someone else's mess. The evidence for this is sprinkled throughout the ruins of Pompeii and Ostia. Graffiti scratched into stone walls in Fullenica reveals the presence of these gods. In fact, some fullers even had small altars within their workshops dedicated to the gods of soap and urine. These gods, whose names we don't often know in their entirety, were intimately tied to the rituals of cleaning, and by extension, the purification process of both people and things. And let's not forget the importance of soap itself. Roman soap wasn't like the gentle, perfumed soap you find in your modern bathroom. It was made from animal fat and wood ash, a rather sticky and unpleasant concoction. But it worked. It helped neutralize the acid of urine, a crucial ingredient in the fuller's trade. So, in a sense, the fullers were relying on both the heavenly and the earthly to ensure their work was up to snuff. It wasn't just about the soap and the urine, though. The fullers had a vested interest in purity because their clientele, wealthy Romans, priests, even soldiers, expected nothing less than perfection. And because they worked with garments worn by people who held high status, their ability to produce spotless, immaculately cleaned fabrics gave them both professional pride and a certain sense of connection to the divine. They were, in their own way, upholding the very fabric of Roman society. Yes, you read that right. The fullers were the unsung heroes of Roman hygiene, bridging the gap between the dirt and the divine. Sometimes, a fuller might even find themselves at a Roman temple, offering a small token or prayer to their deities before embarking on the day's work. It wasn't uncommon to hear a fuller muttering a prayer as they washed away stains, anything from a plea for a better workday to an earnest request for forgiveness for the stink of urine that lingered far too long in their clothes. After all, they were handling the fabrics of the gods themselves, priests' robes, soldiers' tunics, and sometimes even items used in the temples themselves. The connection between divinity and dirt wasn't just metaphysical, it was fabric-based, and fullers were the middlemen in this sacred exchange. Now, you may be wondering, did this strange worship of urine gods actually make the fuller's life any better? Hardly. The work remained grueling, dirty, and often thankless, but the belief in divine intervention provided a small cushion against the back-breaking labor. It gave them something to hold on to while standing knee-deep in their vats, stirring the liquid of life. And let's face it, the liquid of life was pretty gross in this case. So there you are, fully immersed in the filth of your day, and you pause for a second. Maybe you glance up at the small, worn idol sitting on the shelf in the corner of the shop. A silent prayer? A whispered thanks? Who knows? But as you lift another tunic, prepare to scrub out yet another stain, there's something oddly comforting about the notion that you're not just cleaning clothes. You're also cleaning souls. Or at least, that's the hope. At the end of the day, when the last tunic is washed and dried, and your hands ache from scrubbing, it's this belief that keeps you going. The world may smell bad, your clothes may stink of sweat and urine, but the gods of soap and urine are with you. And that, in itself, makes the endless scrubbing seem a little less soul-crushing. In ancient Rome, the act of washing was linked to moral purification, and the spiritual aspect of fulling became important enough to earn the attention of gods and household deities. Graffiti and inscriptions, found in Thessaloniki, reveal references to these gods and offer a glimpse into how fullers incorporated spirituality into their everyday routines. The gods they worshipped were not grandiose deities, but local domestic gods whose favor was sought through small offerings in exchange for assistance in cleaning the garments that were considered sacred. You thought this was a man's world, didn't you? The Thessalonica, the workshop where the air always stinks of bleach and urine, the place where workers stomped wool underfoot like 1,000 drunken dancers. The work is hard, the hours are long, and the smell, oh, the smell, would chase away any sane person before they even entered. But you know what? It's not just men who did it. That's right, there were women here too. Now, I'm not saying it was all sunshine and clean linens for these women. No. In the grand Roman hierarchy, women didn't exactly rank high. Their roles were often confined to the shadows, the quiet corners, the spaces where work was hard, but invisible. Still, there were women in the Thessalonica, and their presence says something important about the structure of the ancient Roman workforce. You don't just stumble into this line of work. whether by choice, necessity, or birth. The women of the Fulanica were the quiet pillars that kept the operation going. It wasn't common, of course. Roman society was definitely male-dominated, like an ancient version of an exclusive club where women could only come in if they had special permission. But there are clues hidden in history, tiny, overlooked fragments, that suggest that while fulling may have been a man's game, there were women working in the vats, managing the laundry, and overseeing the dirty details. Maybe you're imagining women as the silent partners, relegated to fetching water and beating wool into submission. But no. According to Roman records, some women were full-fledged members of the Fulanica staff. These women didn't just help out. They worked. They ran the show. They ran the business. Take a deep breath. Imagine the daily chaos of the Fulanica, the raw reality of it all. The sound of wool being pounded, the sharp tang of ammonia, the thudding of feet stamping the soaked fabric, the occasional shout from a supervisor trying to manage the chaos. And there, in the middle of it all, is a woman. Maybe she's in charge. Maybe she's managing the crew. Maybe she's the one making sure that every tunic, every toga comes out pristine. She's right there, overseeing everything. No doubt, some of these women were respected by their peers and even by their clients. They had to be tough. The Fulanica wasn't a place for the faint of heart. And the work? Oh, it was brutal. It wasn't a job you could do and then take a quick break to sip some wine or lounge in a bath. It was sweat, dirt, and grime. Imagine putting in 12-hour days, scrubbing, stomping, rinsing wool in vats of urine, and then repeating it again the next day. And the worst part? There was no real way out. For women in the Fulanica, especially if they were slaves or from lower social classes, this was a way of life. It's all they knew, and it's all they had. Women in the Fulanica didn't just take care of the laundry either. They were essential for managing the household logistics. A Fulanica wasn't just a business. It was a tight-knit community. In smaller workshops, you'd often find the fuller's wife managing the domestic side, ensuring the staff was fed, that there was enough wool to process, and that the shop ran smoothly. For women who worked in the Fulanica by choice, it was a place where they could earn a living, but their options were still limited by the social norms of the time. In larger Fulanici, however, it wasn't uncommon for women to have a more specialized role. Some women were known to have taken part in more technical aspects of the fulling process, particularly during the bleaching phase. Bleaching, you see, wasn't just about throwing fabric into a vat and hoping for the best. It was a skill, a talent. Women in these roles worked closely with the men, sometimes even directing the bleaching process. The ability to handle delicate fabrics, to ensure a proper finish, was an art. It wasn't a job that everyone could do, and the fact that women were involved at this level is a testament to their skill and determination. The women who worked in these roles didn't just blend into the background. They became indispensable. The men might have had the brawn for the physical labor, but the women brought a touch of finesse to the process. In a male-dominated society, this was no small feat. But not all women were necessarily in the Fulanica by choice. Slavery was widespread in ancient Rome, and many women who worked in the Fulanica were likely enslaved. These women had little say in their lives or their labor. They were part of a larger system where their time, bodies, and efforts were controlled and exploited by those in power. It wasn't an ideal job, and it wasn't a job anyone would choose for themselves if given the opportunity to escape. But despite the hardship, there was something empowering about these women's roles. The very fact that they were there, working shoulder to shoulder with men, managing the flow of the Pholenica, was a reflection of their resilience. Ancient Roman society might not have been kind to women, but there they were, elbow deep in the dirt, ensuring that the Roman world smelled a little less like decay and a little more like fresh, clean linen. In fact, there's a fascinating historical tidbit about how the women in Pholeniki were sometimes portrayed in Roman art. In several depictions, women were shown taking part in the fulling process in positions of leadership. They were in charge, and their presence wasn't some accidental oversight. It was a statement. It showed that women, despite the patriarchal system of Rome, had an undeniable presence in these essential industries. They may have been in the background, but they were there, and they were essential. The historical records that mention these women often do so sparingly, but when you dig deeper, you realize that they were more than mere workers. They were warriors in their own right. They fought against the odds to carve out a place for themselves in an industry where their work, sweat, and perseverance were often unseen and undervalued. So, next time you picture the world of ancient Rome, imagine this: a bustling Pholenica with the constant stomping of feet and the rhythmic shuffle of wool. And amidst it all, a woman stands at the center, managing, directing, and ensuring that the fabric of Roman society, quite literally, is as clean as it can be. A silent hero in a world that rarely gave her credit. As with many professions in ancient Rome, fulling was an area of work that heavily relied on slave labor. Pholeniki, or fulling workshops, often employed large numbers of slaves to handle the manual labor of fulling wool. These slaves, typically taken from conquered territories, were subjected to the harsh and repetitive tasks of beating, stomping, and washing wool in vats of water and alkaline substances. The work was physically demanding and often dangerous, with slaves being exposed to harmful chemicals like lye and urine, which could irritate the skin. For the fullers themselves, the use of slaves allowed them to focus on the more skilled aspects of their work, such as managing the fulling process and ensuring the quality of the finished product. However, this reliance on slavery also placed fullers in a complicated social position. On one hand, fullers were vital to Roman society and the economy, providing necessary goods such as clean garments. But on the other, they were dependent on a system that saw a large portion of the workforce treated as property. The presence of slavery in the fulling industry illustrates the darker side of Roman labor, where a few free men could profit from the grueling work done by those who had no freedom at all. While some fullers might have been free citizens, many were often employed by larger businesses or worked independently, contracting labor from slaves or lower-class workers. The conditions in the Pholeniki, whether under the fuller's control or otherwise, were harsh. Fullers were also at risk of the same social stigmas faced by those who handled other unclean or lowly tasks like butchers or undertakers, further underscoring the class disparities in ancient Roman society. Thanks for listening. If you're already asleep, great, we've successfully lulled you to sleep. And if you're still awake, well, that's impressive. If you genuinely enjoy these boring stories about history, feel free to subscribe to our channel whenever you're in the mood. Sleep well, and good night.